Help protect us from racism and xenophobia by becoming an I Love Black People ambassador today. Join on iloveblackpeople.com. No matter where you are in the world, join us today and get access to the I Love Black People network. Special thanks to Banneker Communities.
Greetings, another edition of I Love Black People. We're going to probably call this the Africa Inbound Edition. I'm currently traveling to Zimbabwe. I'm here in Harare, Zimbabwe, and working on some projects with I Love Black People. We actually have an office in Zimbabwe at the Harare International Conference Center. So it's definitely a great opportunity to reach out to y'all. Typically, I'm based in Washington, D.C., so when we were doing our interviews and our activities, they're centered in D.C. Now we're doing a little traveling, and I was in South Africa doing some work with some of our I Love Black People members, identifying some issues there related to xenophobia. And, you know, I think it'd be good just to back up and just maybe even talk about even some of my first visits to the continent. I actually was in my first country, and I'd actually said this, you know, I wanted to make sure that for the sake of our ancestors, that the first country I ever visit had to be in Africa. And, you know, even though Mexico and the Caribbean are oftentimes people's first adventure outside of the United States, for those who live in the States, I wanted to make sure that, you know, for the sake of our ancestors and appreciation of the struggle that they actually went through and being kidnapped and actually all the horrible things that was done through transatlantic slavery, to make sure I came back the first chance I had. So to be free and not go back home seemed to be a bit much. So the first trip was in 1995. It was the African American Summit. It literally was done by an amazing man that put together the Reverend Leon Sullivan, the summit. And it was a group of students from Howard University. Shout out to Janae Roscoe, wonderful dear sister who got us the opportunity. But their conference was based, they had a component for students, a youth component, where they had college students from all over the continent of Africa, as well as students from all over the U.S., you know, come together and actually discuss common issues that we face as a people globally, a Pan-African context to it. And then, you know, fast forward from there, I actually started going to Zimbabwe in 2007, I believe. And I owe all that to a brother named Obi Igbuna, who put me together with my business partner, Christopher Mapendera, who also attended Howard University. And we were looking for ways that we could actually improve the quality of life of the brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe using technology. And we had looked at a couple of projects with some old farms. And if y'all know, in Zimbabwe, they one of the few liberation struggles in the world where after their liberation struggle, they actually regained their land back. So they actually had a thing called a fast track land reform, where they literally made sure that the colonizers who had stolen and killed and did all kinds of things to get land, that land was restored to the indigenous people. So if we contextually, many times in the liberation struggles, they would overthrow the colonial leadership, but actual economics, the land, the best land, would oftentimes be still controlled by the former colonizer. And of course, they would still play an integral role in the economy. Well, in the case of Zimbabwe, what happened was they not only did the Zimbabweans win a armed struggle, which is another thing. Some countries have gotten their so-called freedom through a diplomatic means. In Zimbabwe's case, wasn't until 1980, and they literally was shooting and killing and fighting back, and to the point where the Europeans said, "Look, you know, we can't take this anymore. Please, let's come to a settlement." And Zimbabwe was liberated in 1980. With that being said, the United States government had protracted 20-year sanctions ever since the Zimbabwean people got their land back. The United States, I think under Bush, levied sanctions that were very crippling, similar to what you see maybe in Cuba with the embargo, where you have a small country, about 14 million people at the time or so, can't trade without having their goods being uh, diverted or financing being prohibited, and all kinds of things to undermine their ability to sustain their economy. And of course, when this is done by the U.S. government, is meant to foment or undermine the current government. They want regime change. So oftentimes people talk about, even with Russia, and Russia's in a different situation. They're huge countries, not 14 million. It's literally millions of folks, and it's a large land mass with so many resources. It's been more difficult for the United States to have sanctions when this, Russia has its own ports. It has, part of the countries in Europe, part is in Asia. So it has so many trading partners that are on the border. Well, a country like Zimbabwe is landlocked. It can't actually do commerce without going through another country. And many of the countries they call it the SADC region. That's the southern region, Namibia, Malawi, South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia. Well, many of those countries don't want to have any problems with the U.S. government, so they actually sometimes participate in these sanctions. Now, recently, there's been more cooperation with the people in the region, because they know that if one country has a problem, it'll overflow into the other countries. So sharing borders actually matters. So that's been a real, issue that has, come up again and again, dealing with doing business in Zimbabwe. But with that being said, we had some difficulties getting the financing for the ethanol project. And ethanol, for those, who understand it, it's really just an extra step in the refining distillation process. So we actually had identified an abandoned rum distillery in a sugarcane. I think it's Chicheria. My tongue is still colonized, so when I try to say these African names, it gets kind of a little tricky. So y'all forgive me. I'm going to do better. But it was definitely a one of these distilleries where we were able to then go in and add an additional filtration process to allow them to use the sugar cane for alcohol for ethanol. But we weren't able to get the funding into the country. We had the credit in the U.S. through the work we had been working on. And then so we pivoted to more agricultural work, where we were working with some cotton, as well as some small like vegetable products and crops. And still the biggest issue was moving money into Zimbabwe. Fast forward, got involved. My background I went to Tuskegee and Howard University for mechanical engineering, and so did my co-founder, Mr. Christopher Mapendera. He attended Howard University also in engineering. And so we realized we needed to come up with a system to help us move money effectively. And at that time, the only people that allowed you to move money relatively quickly was Western Union and MoneyGram. And they have a duopoly over African remittances. And we said, look, we can actually save money and actually, give the people a better product that's faster and using technology that doesn't require them to have to go through a Western Union. Now, of course, we hear people talk about blockchain, Bitcoin now for the value of the token, and people talk about how to get rich. But at that time, we were just using or leveraging the ability to move value over what you say the rails. Let me say another way. Like, if you look at a car, the US dollar needs a road. Let me say, if you look at it as a car, that's the US dollar. It still needs a road to move from point A to point B. You need a credit card to use it, a check. You need something to move that value from A to B. With the Bitcoin, it was the road and the car. Using Bitcoin, you can move anything anywhere without having a third party involved. And that was our use case that to help the folks we were working with in Zimbabwe. So we actually worked with women farmers who were like in, I think, 10 districts of Zimbabwe. And we were able to, with their cell phones. And again, a lot of people often think about Africa and they think there's no phones or something. There's really more phones than people. Oftentimes people have actually more than one phone. The problem with communication in Zimbabwe and many parts of Africa is that the cost of data is very expensive. And this is, again, if I want to do a Hotep conspiracy, here's my tinfoil hat. It seems like it's deliberate. The cost to use internet and data is so expensive. With my team in Zimbabwe, unlike if you're in the U.S., the cost is relatively inexpensive. You think of an idea while you're in your car or in an Uber or at train. You can just go and Google something real quick. But data being so expensive in Africa, you got to wait till you get to like a cafe with a hotspot or some other place where literally so if you can imagine, it slows business down because of the cost of the data. And the data in many countries, especially outside of Zimbabwe and in Africa, the telcos are still controlled by France and the UK. And they make their money using these high fees of data in Africa. But in Europe, they price points are much more competitive, and they fight for the least amount of cost for their services. But in Africa, they charge very predatory. And same thing, like I was saying, with the remittances. The cost of moving money in Europe or Asia, much cheaper. But in Africa, there's a black tax. There's a racist tax on our people. And technology, again, is not going to save anybody, but is a tool that allows us to use other means in order to help our people. So we were able to use the fact that these women farmers had phones and actually send them coupons using Bitcoin, where they could actually use those coupons for their farms. And they would go to the supply store and redeem the coupons for seed, fertilizer, chemicals. And we couldn't have done anything like that as quickly and inexpensively, but for the use of the blockchain and being able to move. If we had to go through Western Union and all these other third parties, it would have been very expensive and slow. With using the blockchain, we were able to almost instantly send money to almost 100 people in 10 different places. So if you can imagine that, it was literally just the speed of the internet. And if you were trying to send that kind of value with Western Union, it just would have been, you wouldn't. And let me just say this: with the blockchain, you can tell when someone received it. You can know when they actually, the time that they received it. And if they move it again, you would know when they removed the coupon. So it literally gave us a great system, decentralized, without having to pay incredible fees to make all these things happen. Now, fast forward to today, and that was like, we did that in 2017, 2016. And now what we've realized that, with all the work that we've done with technology and moving value, the real issue that we've seen facing Black people globally is that Black tax is not just about transactions. It's literally about our safety. And in 2019, we started looking at the concept of the Green Book as a formula, as a format to take that digitally, to create a global safety net, to make sure no matter where Black people were in the world, 1.5 billion. A lot of times people don't realize, the population of people of African descent is about the size of China. So when people talk about large market size, Black people are a big market size. Dealing with the venture capitalists in the Silicon Valley, they oftentimes think when you address that serviceable market, that's a niche thing, when in truth, there's actually less people of European descent on this planet than there are Africans. So if you're just targeting Europeans, numerically, their numbers are inferior. However, of course, we understand in the system of white supremacy, their spending, their behavior is put at a premium, and everybody else is discounted. What we saw is a remedy to dealing with that is that discount, that mistreatment is unacceptable, and that we now have technology that we can actually leverage to create a global safety net where no matter where our people are in the world, they can actually identify places where they can go and be treated with dignity and respect, where they won't be discounted. And the original Green Book was about 3 categories they focused on. It was transportation, including gas stations, places to stay, accommodations, hotels, apartments, as well as places to eat, places to sleep, right? And the issue sometimes that gets conflated or confused is people think that that was about a Black business directory where they were trying to recycle the dollar. And it's not true. It was many businesses in the Green Book that weren't Black owned, but they were safe for Black people and would treat us with dignity and respect. You didn't have to suffer the insults of racism. And that was the part, making sure we were safe. And so leveraging that information, we were able to have from the 1930s to the 1960s a guidebook that helped make sure that Black folks' lives were preserved and give them insight by sharing the information that typically might have been more informal, but put in the book allowed everybody to have access to it. So by 2019, we realized that the issue wasn't just about transactions and making sure we protected ourselves, but literally in our everyday lives, that was the issue. And instead of just limiting it to places that go and places that places to eat, places to sleep, and transportation, we realized that traveling was not necessarily the issue. It's a symptom. When we're traveling, we're vulnerable. That's the real issue, the fact of being vulnerable. And that vulnerability is that you don't know anyone, so you don't have information to make good decisions. And in order to make good decisions, you need good information. And good information is accurate, relevant, and timely, ART. Good information is necessary for good decision. And the characteristics of good information is that it's accurate, relevant, and timely. With that being the case, when you're traveling, you're oftentimes very limited on how good that information might be, since you're new to an environment. When someone can provide some information that's timely, accurate, and relevant in regarding to that new environment, it can give you better abilities to have better outcomes. Well, we realized that it wasn't just traveling is a vulnerability. When you're sick, and as we saw and we've seen with the COVID, if you think it's man-made or if you think it's natural, it still is a reflection of a very toxic world where now people are dying at such rates through something we had never heard of and don't even know allegedly where it came from. Where do you go where you're going to be treated fairly, where you're not going to be a denied service or somebody experimenting on you or trying to, take advantage of you? So we realized that another vulnerability is healthcare. And then also with so many, the criminalization of Blackness, when we walk in our store and people are staring and looking and following us when we've done nothing wrong. It's almost like a form of collective punishment, which is actually illegal internationally. You can't penalize people like through collective punishment just because they live in the same place or look the same way. If I didn't create a crime or commit a crime, you shouldn't treat me like a criminal. I don't care who you arrested before me. But that being the case, if you do find yourself in a particular place and you need legal assistance, that's a vulnerability. Now the state or someone is now accusing you or doing something harmful to you, and you're vulnerable, and you need to protect your rights as a human being. So we've included legal in that. And also we've included, so it's a total 8 categories. So it's places to eat, places to sleep, transportation, finance, healthcare, legal, what else is it? Education / childcare. You got to make sure you take care of your children because you don't want no folks trying to harm them. And then we have beauty. So those 8 categories are what we leveraged to create this global safety net based on what Victor Green did with the original Green Book. And with doing that, we've been able to, again, have maybe over 50,000 businesses, but our focus is targeting key cities where many of our people travel. It's like about 200 and some cities. And what we're reaching out to as many folks that can hear us is that we're trying to get at least 3 recommended businesses in each of the 8 categories. So a total of 24 businesses. And so we're not it's not about a numbers game of trying to get all the businesses. We're trying to get quality businesses that you've gone into. And the reason why we use businesses, because sometimes that gets, again, goes back to people thinking we're just talking about dollars and making money. We talk about businesses because businesses can control what happens in their environment, in their particular space. They control that as business owners. If we were trying to change the behavior of states and cities and countries, we have to go through a whole lot of politics. But when it's the owner of an establishment they have the power and control to dictate that environment. And we think that that's an effective way to identify places that are safe because of that level of control. So it's more about identifying safe places than it is about recycling the dollar. And the place, it actually could be, if you're in, let's say, Copenhagen, and you get sick in Denmark, and now you need a doctor. It might be a Mongolian woman doctor that all the Black folks there go to because she treats them with dignity and respect. That's the real issue. The issue is, of course, we want to make sure that we identify Black-owned businesses that treat Black folks well. But the real issue is making sure that Black people are no longer being harmed and humiliated and being protected from that. So any environment that we identify that does that is what's key. And we're involved in, with your support. All those who are listening to the radio, we don't always take time out. We normally have interviews, but, kicking off this year, we wanted to make sure that everyone was clear that we walk into each one of these years with real agendas. And our agenda is literally to create a global safety net to protect Black people all over the world from the harms and humiliations of racism and xenophobia by creating a global safety network, if you will, using technology that connects the information of the best Black-friendly places in the world, as well as people who are interested in seeing it happen. So that being said, we're focusing more on cities and in the United States this year. We're definitely I want to give a shout out. We have paid members who actually take their time out to support us every year to keep what we're doing alive. Even though we're a startup, as you know, Black startups don't get funded in Silicon Valley like our counterparts. But we know that our ideas are not less than and oftentimes are better than most, but our access to capital is often the thing that's the controlling factor of how well we're able to do. But with the support of our paid members, we've been able to leverage a lot of those funds in order to keep this radio show going. Make sure we have a Saturday class that we have about Pan-Africanism that we share. Our office is in Harare, making sure our team is able to continue to build the safety net that you're supporting. So those things are what we're focusing on, and we need as many of the folks who are listening to just download the app. It's I Love Black People, Safe Places. It's free. And just literally share the places that you already go, your favorite places in your city right now, because your city may be, familiar to you, but it might not be familiar to someone else. And when they get there, it'd be great if they could have good information, because they got to make good decisions. And what are the characteristics of good information? It's accurate, relevant, and timely. So if you could share that information, that goes a long way to create this amazing, wonderful safety net. And just trying to focus, we've globally, and this is paid and unpaid members, we have over 100,000 members. We're looking at having some meetup, physical meetups, so people can meet each other and help, continue to build this network where we're literally identifying the issues of xenophobia. And I know a lot of times we talk about the United States, about racism and the realness of that. But oftentimes, what's been used by white supremacist ideology is a kind of like a divide and rule. You have people who, the artificial borders that carve up Africa, you have people who might have disputes because of the different borders. Or even in the Dominican Republic, where we have a villa. Make sure you guys check out villabethany.com. We're leveraging our villa and leveraging the support of our different clients that come and visit to help deal with some of the issues that are facing Haitian immigrants that are they're actually Dominicans, because they're born there, but because of the fact that they don't have they're not being recognized, they need visas, they need help. So what we're doing with the safety net is actually not just doing it on a digital level where you actually are creating something online, actually in real life, in live in color, in places like the Dominican Republic and South Africa. We're also identifying physical things and things that actually we can do as direct action. And so when you're visiting South Africa, we want to make sure that are familiar with the communities that are doing great things to elevate our Black experience for all our brothers and sisters, no matter where they are. And the same thing in the Dominican Republic. We want to make sure that the folks who come and visit, the tourists, are able to help elevate the Black experience there for all the people who may not have the money. But like we said, this safety net that we're talking about, the Green Book, wasn't about money. It was about something more valuable than that, and that's our lives. We're priceless. I don't care how much money you got in your pocket. We want to make sure that you are treated with different dignity and respect and not have to suffer the insults of racism and xenophobia. So these are the projects we're going to be working on, making sure we get as many of you involved. I'm here in on the continent in Zimbabwe. We're literally working with the team. Some of our team is in Kigali, Rwanda, Nairobi, Kenya. We brought everybody together so that we can kind of map out this wonderful year that we have, that God has provided us, an opportunity to do more, putting the roadmaps together, tightening up some of the execution that we're doing, and kind of get on the same page. So I pray to everybody else who's in, and you can hear my voice, that and don't take it like, one of the things we talk about is eating an elephant. You don't eat an elephant in one bite. You take several bites. So in many ways, sometimes the best laid plans, they say man plans, but God plans best. But it's best to start with a plan. No matter what happens, it might change. It probably will change. Okay. What they say, everybody got a plan until they get hit in the mouth. Yes, life will hit us in the mouth at times. I'm gonna leave it at that. I'll be back in the States in a few. But I definitely keep all y'all in mind in prayer as we move forward in this new year. And as I always leave here, I am because we are, and I definitely wouldn't be me without you. So again, thank you so much, everyone.
To help protect us from racism and xenophobia by becoming an I Love Black People ambassador today, join on iloveblackpeople.com. No matter where you are in the world, join us today and get access to the I Love Black People network. Special thanks to Banneker Communities.